Richard Boyd Barrett.
Is it Minister McGrath who's taking this? Okay, Minister, you may have heard the radio this morning and the really shocking news that St Joseph's in Shankill, a dementia care facility, which is the biggest and arguably the best dementia care facility in the entire country, has sent letters out to all of the families of those who have family members with dementia in the facility to say that they believe they may have to close very, very soon, possibly by the end of the year, because of a deficit in funding. Now, this is shocking news for people, and everybody in my area knows somebody who's had a family member in there. In my own case, I've had an extended family member who had her final years. She was a dementia sufferer in that facility, and the staff were wonderful. The care was really amazing. And one of the features of St Joseph's is that it's a high dependency dementia unit, or it caters for high dependency dementia sufferers. But it seems that, and I was actually sort of, it was indicated to me by family members of people who had family in there earlier in the summer that there was a problem. And I put in a parliamentary question at the time expressing concern about the funding deficit and the implications this could have for St Joseph's. And I was told in a fairly sort of cold response from the HSE that they were discharging their funding responsibilities under the Fair Deal scheme, or what's more properly known as the Nursing Home Support Scheme. But the problem is that this does not provide sufficient funds for high dependency sufferers. And so the deficit, the extra cost of providing care for high dependency sufferers of dementia has been covered by St Joseph's themselves, leading to a deficit of 7 million building up to 2012, which St Joseph's have managed to cover, but they're facing a deficit, an ongoing deficit for this year of 1.2 million, and they simply can't cover it anymore. They haven't got the money to cover the deficit. The deficit exists because the National Treatment Purchase Fund and the HSE and the government ultimately won't provide the additional necessary funds for high dependency dementia sufferers. Now, Emma Belmine, who is the chief executive, put it very well when she sort of explained the injustice, the cruel injustice of this for families and dementia sufferers. And it's hard enough dealing with family members, high dependency dementia sufferers, than being treated in this way. And she said, decision makers and funders need to understand that people living with a diagnosis of dementia cannot be discriminated against and are entitled to the same spectrum of care as those with a different terminal illness. Funding for dementia care also needs to be increased significantly and allocated fairly, not based on numbers in beds but on the needs of people. It shouldn't matter whether the person is receiving that specialist dementia care in a HSE facility, a private nursing home, or an independent not-for-profit facility such as St Joseph's, which it is, a not-for-profit facility. So, Minister, I am asking the Government to, as a matter of urgency, cover that deficit to ensure the biggest and best care facility for dementia sufferers in this country does not close, causing great hardship for dementia sufferers and their families.
First of all, I want to thank Deputy Richard Boyd Barrett for raising this issue, and I'm also taking this topical issue on behalf of Minister Jim Daly. St Joseph's in Shankill is part of the St John of God Hospital Services Group. It provides both residential care and daycare service for service users, all of whom have a diagnosis of dementia. Many of the 60 residential places are funding to the Nursing Home Support Scheme, the NHSS. Separately, the HSE contracts for approximately 25 daycare places per year at St Joseph's. The Nursing Home Support Scheme, commonly referred to as the Fair Deal, is a system of financial support for people who require long-term residential care. The participants contribute to the cost of the care according to their means, while the state pays the balance of the cost. The state aims to ensure that long-term nursing home care is accessible and is affordable for everyone, and that people are cared for in the most appropriate settings. The Nursing Home Support Scheme is expected to support 23,042 people at any time in 2019. The NHS budget for 2019 saw an increase of 24.3 million over 2018, making a total budget of £985.8 million for 2019. In 2020, the NHS will see a further investment in its budget of £45 million, bringing the total annual budget for the NHS to £1.03 billion. This substantial investment will provide ongoing long-term residential care over the course of 2020, ensuring that the scheme continues to deliver affordable and accessible nursing home care for our citizens with long-term care needs. The National Treatment Purchase Fund has been designated by the Minister for Health pursuant to Section 40 of the Nursing Home Support Scheme Act 2009 as a body authorised to negotiate with proprietors of non-HSE registered nursing homes to reach agreement in relation to the maximum price that can be charged for the provision of long-term residential care services to nursing home support residents. The NTPF has statutory independence in the performance of its functions and negotiates with the nursing home on an individual basis. The Minister for Health does not have any role in this regard. The NTPF has clear established processes for agreeing prices and has successfully negotiated terms with over 430 private and voluntary nursing homes participating in the scheme. The NTPS processes are available to all nursing homes, and since the end of 2017 there has been a net increase in the number of nursing homes operating in Ireland, with an increase of almost 1,300, that's 5.7%, in the number of beds in nursing homes with whom the NTPF has agreed terms. Its statutory role is to negotiate maximum prices charged for the provision of long-term residential care services to the NHS residents. The NTPF established a process or appropriate mechanism for engagement. The established processes include provision for an NTPF review mechanism where agreement is not initially reached in relation to the price. The HSE has been in extensive engagement with St John of God Hospital Services Group in relation to the daycare service at St Joseph's, and this engagement is ongoing. I acknowledge the role of the private and voluntary providers in residential care provision. I encourage St John of God Group to continue their engagement with the HSE in relation to the daycare services, and I would also encourage continued engagement with the NTPF process with regard to the prices for residential care services. Thank you, Cancorla.
Minister, my office has been inundated for the last few days by frightened people who have family members suffering with dementia in St Joseph's because of the possibility that this amazing facility will go, causing extreme hardship for dementia sufferers themselves, their families, and indeed the wonderful staff, and 100 volunteers who on a voluntary basis assist with this dementia care centre. Frank, for example, writes to me and says, my father died age 48, my mother died 2 years ago in 2017, she was 92, and I've been taking care of my stepfather, age 87, who has dementia since my mother's death. I work full-time and depend heavily on the service and help of the wonderful people in the daycare facility in St Joseph's in Shankill. Without this service, I don't know what I will do. The attached letter, which I received today, has frightened me regarding the consequences should this facility close, and I have a whole range of others. Now, Minister, what Frank and others who are writing to me want to know is that the government is not going to let this facility close for want of €1.2 million. And I want you to acknowledge the point I made earlier on and that Emma Balmain made, is that the funding provided under the National Treatment Purchase Fund does not recognise the difference between low dependency and high dependency dementia sufferers. Every other part of our health service recognise that. They don't say, Well, regardless of how bad your cancer is or what level it's at, you're getting the same treatment regardless. Right? Of course, you tailor the treatment to the need. But it seems when it comes to dementia suffering, you say that's as much money as a dementia sufferer is getting and no more, regardless of their needs. Now that is cruel and inhumane. And by the way, the daycare rate given by the HSE to St Joseph's has not increased 1 cent since 2008, even though all the costs have obviously gone up dramatically since then. Right, so I'm asking you, Minister, intervene, for the government to intervene, ensure this facility doesn't close, because a lot of people, a lot of staff, a lot of families are going to suffer if it does.
Yes, can I say, first of all, of course, I will bring your concerns back to Minister Jim Daly in relation to the important points you raised in the debate today. And of course, I fully acknowledge the important role placed by the voluntary and private providers in the provision of services such as residential care and day care to older people, including those with dementia. I can assure the House, Cancorla, that appropriate mechanisms exist for service providers such as St Joseph's to engage with the relevant agencies. And you can tell those people that have major concerns and are worried. In relation to daycare services, there has been intensive engagement between the HSE and St Joseph's this year. The HSE has committed to continue this engagement with a view of further assisting St Joseph's where possible. In relation to the residential services at St Joseph's, the majority of residents are supported to the Nursing Home Support Scheme, where residents contribute to the cost of the care according to their means, while the state pays the balance of the cost. The National Treatment Purchase Fund has statutory responsibility for negotiating with individual private and voluntary nursing homes to reach agreement in relation to the maximum price that will be charged for the provision of residential care services to Nursing Home Support Scheme residents. The NTPF has well-established processes in which all providers must engage. In the event that agreement cannot be reached through engagement process with the NTPF contract negotiator, there is a process where the nursing home may seek a review by the NTPF CEO. I understand that the initial engagement and negotiation process is very active, and given the NTPF's statutory independence in the performance of its function, it would not be appropriate for me to comment any further, other than to reiterate my encouragement to St Joseph's to engage fully with those established processes. Thank you, Cancorla.